Thanks to Asian Doll, initially the streets were made to believe that King Von had blamed his homies for leaving him out to die before drawing his last breath. But now, a hospital staff member is speaking out, and the truth is far more disturbing. This new revelation came shortly after Von's cousin made a chilling claim.
He was supposed to have 3 surgeries. He made it through 2. He hopped off the bed after the second surgery and supposedly started fighting the nurse.
What really happened in King Von's final moments? Strap in, because these details are darker than anyone expected. Final words. The streets speak. Chicago's concrete jungles whisper stories about their fallen soldiers, but when it comes to King Von, even his final moments sparked controversy. The O-Block legend left this world on November 6, 2020, but what he said before he crossed over depends on who you ask. 2 voices speak the loudest in this dispute, his manager Jameson Francois and his ex-girlfriend Asian Doll, with both claiming different versions of the truth. Asian Doll, born Misharon Jermisha Allen, carried Von's heart while he was alive and claimed to carry his final thoughts after his death. The Queen of Drill took to social media in the raw days following Von's murder, dropping what she claimed were his actual last words, words that painted a picture of betrayal and abandonment. According to Asian Doll's now deleted posts on X, formerly Twitter, Von's final breath carried heavy accusations. "Y'all let them get up on me. Stop crying, y'all let them get me." These alleged words suggested Von died feeling abandoned by his own people, his crew failing to protect him when danger approached. But how did she know these words if she wasn't at the hospital? Asian Doll claimed she received this information through a spiritual advisor who could communicate with Von posthumously. This supernatural claim immediately raised eyebrows, with many questioning the validity of information obtained through such means. "I'm talking to Von through my spiritual advisor," she reportedly explained in texts that were later exposed by Von's manager. "He letting me know everything." The streets were divided. Was this the raw truth from beyond the grave, or a fabrication born from grief and a desire to remain connected to Von's legacy? Jameson Francois, also known as Track, wasn't just Von's manager. He was present during those final moments, taking bullets himself during the same incident that claimed Von's life. When he heard Asian Doll's claims, he wasn't about to let them stand unchallenged. In interviews and social media posts, Francois presented a completely different narrative. According to him, Von's last words focused on love, not betrayal. Von's last words were to tell Lil Durk and his fans that he loves them. This version painted Von's final moments as reflective and appreciative, thinking of his mentor and the supporters who helped build his career. Francois didn't mince words when addressing Asian Doll's claims. During an interview with DJ Academics, he dismissed her account as goofy.
But you need to slow down, because 1, you wasn't there. So how can you make assumption and accuse guys of doing this and that? And the last words that she's talking about, and it's in a text message, and I can show you.
He directly challenged her credibility by exposing text messages where she mentioned speaking to Von through a spiritual advisor. She talking to Von through her spiritual advisor from after death, Francois stated, his frustration evident. He emphasized his own credibility by pointing to his physical presence at the scene and his own injuries suffered alongside Von. "Let one more person from the outside that's close to Von keep on with all this goofy shit," Francois warned on Instagram stories, promising to expose more if the claims continued. His first-hand account carried weight, backed by the authority of someone who was not only present, but also wounded in the same violent exchange. By 2025, years after Von's death, a new narrative began circulating online, one even more dramatic than the previous competing claims. Videos with titles like "New video of King Von jumping out of his hospital bed looking for his gun during surgery and dying" appeared on platforms like YouTube and Worldstar Hip Hop, suggesting an explosive end to the rapper's life. These claims painted a picture of Von desperately fighting with hospital staff, trying to find his weapon even as medical professionals attempted to save his life. According to these stories, it was this final burst of street instinct, looking for his gun instead of accepting medical help, that ultimately caused him to die from shock. A Reddit post claimed that someone named Balo explained how King Von died during surgery, hopped off the bed fighting and looking for his gun, and died. These dramatic claims spread across social media, accumulating hundreds of comments and thousands of views. Balo, King Von's cousin, soon appeared in interviews saying
that he had 3 surgeries, but he made it. He was supposed to have 3 surgeries. He made it through 2. He hopped off the bed after the second surgery and supposedly started fighting the nurse and asked the nurse, "Where's his gun at?"
He continued, explaining that King Von would have made it out alive.
And then he died because he went into shock. So,
Yeah.
so I'm guessing if he would just laid there, he probably would have survived.
While debates raged about what was said in those final moments, one source might have held objective truth: surveillance footage. The shooting outside Monaco Hookah Lounge was captured on camera, with the footage widely circulated online and confirmed authentic by Atlanta police. This footage showed the argument, the escalation to physical confrontation, and the tragic exchange of gunfire that ultimately claimed Von's life. It became a critical piece of evidence in the investigation and subsequent charges against Timothy Leaks. In the absence of indisputable evidence, the streets ultimately decide which version of Von's final moments they choose to believe. For some, Asian Doll's claims of betrayal align with the harsh realities of street life, where loyalty is frequently tested and often found wanting. For others, Francois' account of Von expressing love for Durk and his fans speaks to the growth and perspective gained through Von's journey from the streets to success. Asian Doll's version speaks to the betrayal many feel in the streets, where even your closest associates might fail you when the pressure mounts. Francois' account reflects the growth many saw in Von, a street soldier who found purpose and connection through his art and the platform it provided. Perhaps the most important truth isn't in the specific words spoken, but in the fact that years later, people still care intensely about what Von said in those final moments. His impact was such that his last words became contested territory, with different factions fighting to control the narrative of how a king fell. In Chicago's O Block, Von murals keep his memory alive. In Atlanta, memorial gatherings mark the spot where his blood spilled. Online, his music continues to rack up millions of streams. Through it all, the debate over his final words continues, a testament to a life that ended too soon but left an impression deep enough that even his last breath became legendary. The streets will always remember King Von, not just for how he lived or how he died, but for the legacy he left behind. Whether his final thoughts were of betrayal or love, what's undeniable is that Von's voice continues to echo through the culture, his story continuing to unfold even after his final chapter was written. In life and in death, King Von remained what he always was, a complex figure whose truth shifted depending on who was telling it, a street legend, a storyteller, and a walking contradiction. But what really led to his tragic end? Street legends and deadly feuds, King Von's rise and fall. Before the studio sessions, before the millions of streams, before the name King Von meant anything to anybody outside Chicago's South Side, Davon Daquan Bennett was just another son of the concrete jungle. Born August 9, 1994, Von inherited more than just DNA from his father. He inherited O Block, one of the most notorious blocks in Chicago, named after slain gang member O.D. Perry and considered the most dangerous block in the city. By his teenage years, Von had already built a reputation. The Black Disciples weren't just any gang, they were O Block's governing body, and Von rose through their ranks with a combination of loyalty, fearlessness, and what many would later describe as a natural predisposition for violence. Before he ever touched a mic, Von had touched guns, caught cases, and built a street resume that made even hardened veterans tread carefully around him. His first major run-in with the system came at just 16 when he caught an armed robbery charge in 2011. While locked up, he earned his GED, proof that even behind bars, Von's mind stayed active, planning for whatever future might be possible. But the system wasn't done with Von, and Von wasn't done testing its limits. The revolving door between the streets and the cells would continue to spin throughout his early adulthood. What separated Von from countless other young men on similar paths wasn't just his willingness to engage in street activities, it was his ability to narrate them. Von had a storyteller's gift, a way with words that could transport listeners directly into his world. This talent would eventually catch the ear of fellow Chicago native Lil Durk, founding member of Only the Family, OTF, and one of drill music's architectural minds. In 2018, Durk saw something in Von that transcended the typical street soldier. He signed Von to OTF, giving him the platform to transform his street narratives into studio recordings. Von's debut single, Crazy Story, dropped in December 2018, and the rest, as they say, is history. Though in Von's case, history and street legend would often blur, creating the mystique that both elevated his career and complicated his legacy. Among the most notorious cases linked to Von was the 2014 killing of Gakira K.I. Barnes, a teenage female gang member associated with the Gangster Disciples. Von was questioned as a person of interest, but police couldn't build a solid case due to inconsistencies in witness statements. Years later, in 2021, unsealed documents would name Von as the killer, though he was never formally charged during his lifetime. Von also faced formal charges for the May 2014 shooting of Malcolm Stuckey, along with 2 counts of attempted murder for wounding 2 others. This case went to trial, and Von was ultimately acquitted in December 2017 after claiming self-defense. An outcome that only enhanced his reputation for beating cases and slipping through the system's fingers. Even more striking were allegations uncovered in FBI documents released in January 2023, suggesting Von had placed a $50,000 hit on rival rapper Carlton FBG Duck Weekly, later increasing the bounty to $100,000. Weekly was murdered in August 2020, with 5 O-Block members eventually convicted for the killing, though Von was never charged. While many of these allegations lack definitive legal proof, Von was never convicted of murder. They contributed to a persona that blended art and reality in ways that made it difficult to separate fact from fiction. His lyrics often contained detailed accounts of violence that many listeners interpreted as veiled confessions, further blurring the line between artistic expression and autobiography. The collision course between King Von and Quando Rondo began not as a personal dispute, but as an extension of existing tensions between their respective camps. Von's allegiance to Lil Durk's Only the Family, OTF, and Quando's association with NBA YoungBoy's Never Broke Again, NBA label, placed them on opposite sides of an industry divide that increasingly spilled into real-world animosity. The earliest signs of friction appeared around 2018 to 2019, when Von publicly criticized NBA YoungBoy's music during an Instagram live session. The FK YoungBoy talking about on this song, bruh, he's talking crazy, he ain't even like that. On his A now. Cap. Von's comments, while seemingly dismissive rather than threatening, planted seeds for what would become a deadly conflict. Despite this early tension, Von himself downplayed the seriousness of the situation just days before his death. In an interview, he stated, "Ain't no rap beef and ain't no real beef unless somebody got shot." These words would prove tragically prophetic. On November 6, 2020, Von and his crew were leaving the Opium nightclub in Atlanta when they encountered Quando Rondo's group at the Monaco Hookah Lounge around 4 a.m. Surveillance footage, which later circulated widely online, captured what happened next. Von approaching Quando Rondo's crew, an initial verbal altercation escalating into a physical fight, and then erupting into gunfire. Multiple accounts, including Quando Rondo's subsequent statements, suggest Von's group initiated the physical confrontation. Quando later claimed in an April 2021 interview with Angela Yee that he was asleep in a car when the incident began and didn't even know it was Von until the following day, emphasizing, "I never in life had words with them, ever." As the situation escalated, Timothy Lil Tim Leaks, an associate of Quando Rondo, allegedly fired the shots that struck Von. 6 people were shot during the chaotic exchange, with 3 fatalities, including Von. Both on-duty and off-duty Atlanta police officers were present and fired their weapons during the incident, adding another layer of complexity to an already chaotic scene. Von was transported to a hospital in a private vehicle, but succumbed to his injuries. The following day, November 7th, 2020, Timothy Leaks was arrested and charged with felony murder in connection with Von's death. Leaks himself had been injured during the shootout and was taken into custody at Grady Hospital. What began as a verbal exchange quickly escalated. The footage shows punches being thrown, with Von appearing to strike first. Within seconds, the one-on-one confrontation exploded into a group melee, with members from both sides joining the fray. Quando's public actions following the incident further inflamed tensions. He reportedly purchased an expensive watch for Timothy Leaks, the man charged with Von's murder, and shared images of the gift online. To Von's camp, this appeared to be celebrating rather than regretting the violence that had occurred. During a virtual concert on April 3, 2021, Quando allegedly performed lyrics directly dissing Von. "He got caught without that pole, and now that gone, I'll piss on his grave." These provocative statements, whether intended as bravado or genuine sentiment, only deepened the divide between the two camps. Despite these inflammatory actions, Quando maintained in an April 14, 2021 interview with Angela Yee that he had no prior beef with Von and was caught completely off guard by the confrontation. Quando also denied allegations that he or his crew had attempted to take Von's chain during or after the altercation, dismissing such claims as fabrications meant to further villainize him. He painted himself as a victim of circumstances who was defending himself rather than instigating conflict. The beef didn't end with Von's death. It evolved and expanded, drawing in wider circles from both camps. Lil Durk, Von's mentor and friend, became the primary voice carrying on Von's side of the conflict. His music increasingly contained references to Von's death and veiled threats toward those he held responsible. Social media amplified these tensions, with fans creating the Slide for Von movement that pressured Durk to seek violent retaliation. Figures like Tekashi 6ix9ine Ine fueled this pressure, commenting on Durk's tribute post, "Nooski now Von and you still rapping, go pick up a gun." The ongoing feud would see real-world consequences beyond Von's death. Quando Rondo survived a shooting attempt in May 2021 in Blackshear, Georgia. More significantly, on August 19, 2022, Quando's cousin Saviaya Robinson, also known as Lul Pob, was killed during a shooting in Los Angeles, an incident that would later be connected to Lil Durk in federal charges. Through it all, both sides continued to use music as a battlefield, with lyrics objects serving as both weapons and shields in a conflict that had already claimed lives and would eventually lead to serious legal consequences for those involved. The reaction, Quando Rondo's response, and street perspectives. 3 days after Lil Durk's arrest shook the hip-hop world, Quando Rondo broke his silence. On October 27, 2024, he posted a message on Instagram alongside the announcement of his new track, Life Goes On. Though he never mentioned Durk by name, the timing and content led most observers to interpret it as a direct response to the situation. "We didn't get into this music industry to make it just to stay caught up in this street," Quando wrote. "We all have families and communities counting on us. It's time to leave all that behind. We've already lost so much, and it's heavy on my heart to forgive anyone I had issues with in the past. It's all love from me, praying for everyone." The statement represented a dramatic shift in tone from the provocative stance Quando had taken in the aftermath of Von's death. Gone were the boastful lyrics and taunting social media posts, replaced by a message of reconciliation and moving forward. Whether this represented genuine growth or strategic positioning in light of federal involvement remained subject to interpretation. The streets had whispered about retaliation for King Von since November 2020, but when justice finally came for Lil Durk, it arrived in the form of federal agents, not street soldiers. On October 24, 2024, almost 4 years after Von's death, U.S. Marshals arrested Durk Devontae Banks in Broward County, Florida, on charges that connected directly back to his fallen protege. The indictment, filed in U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, painted a damning picture. Durk had allegedly orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot targeting Quando Rondo. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence, but a calculated conspiracy that resulted in the death of Saviaya Robinson, Quando Rondo's cousin, during a shooting in Los Angeles on August 18, 2022. The charges were comprehensive and severe: conspiracy to commit murder for hire, committing murder for hire involving a death, use of interstate facilities to commit murder for hire resulting in death, using, carrying, and discharging firearms in a violent crime resulting in death, and use of a machine gun in a violent crime resulting in death. If convicted, Durk faced a statutory maximum of life in federal prison, with some reports suggesting the possibility of the death penalty. The federal case against Durk was built on multiple pillars of evidence that collectively told a story of premeditated revenge. Financial records showed credit cards linked to Durk's OTF label, used to arrange travel for 5 co-defendants: Kevon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Bryan Lindsay, and Asa Houston. These men allegedly traveled from Chicago to Los Angeles, specifically to carry out the hit on Quando Rondo. Text messages further implicated Durk in the planning, including one where he allegedly instructed an associate, "Don't book no flights under no names involved with me." This suggested awareness of the conspiracy's illegal nature and attempts to conceal his involvement. Location data placed Durk in the San Fernando Valley on the day of the shooting, physically connecting him to the scene around the time of the incident. Witnesses reportedly confirmed Durk had offered a bounty for Quando Rondo's life, establishing a clear motive linked directly to King Von's death. Perhaps most damning was Durk's apparent attempt to flee the country after his associates were arrested. Prosecutors revealed he had booked multiple international flights to destinations including Dubai, Switzerland, and Italy, suggesting consciousness of guilt as the investigation closed in. The indictment revealed the elaborate planning behind the August 2022 shooting. The 5 OTF associates had allegedly purchased ski masks and obtained firearms in preparation for the hit. While the intended target was Quando Rondo himself, the operation resulted instead in the death of his cousin, Saviaya Robinson, adding another layer of tragedy to the cycle of violence. Durk was held without bond in Broward County Jail, pending transfer to federal custody in Los Angeles. His trial was initially set for January 7, 2025, but was later postponed to October 14, 2025, due to the case's complexity. Court filings revealed the staggering scope of evidence: over 230 gigabytes of digital evidence and 20,000 pages of reports that both prosecution and defense teams needed time to process. The arrest sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community and beyond. Fans organized Free Lil Durk protests, while others pointed out the sad irony that Quando Rondo and Timothy Leaks remained free while Durk faced potential life imprisonment. The situation highlighted the disparity between street justice and legal consequences. Leaks had walked free despite being charged with Von's murder, while Durk now faced the full force of federal prosecution for an alleged revenge plot. Adding to Durk's legal troubles, on February 24, 2025, Saviaya Robinson's mother, Andrea Laquila Robinson, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Durk, his business manager OTF, and another company. This civil action sought financial compensation compensation and ran parallel to the criminal proceedings, creating a two-front legal battle for the Chicago rapper. As the case moved forward, Durk's legal team mounted an aggressive defense, filing motions to dismiss the indictment on grounds that it relied on misinformation. They particularly objected to prosecutors using lyrics from Durk's collaboration with Babyface Ray, Wonderful Wayne, and Jackie Boy as evidence, arguing the lyrics were written months before Robinson's death and were unrelated to the case. The charges against Durk represented more than just legal trouble for one artist. They symbolized the latest chapter in a cycle of violence that had claimed multiple lives across several years. What began with King Von's death had spiraled into a chain of retaliation and counter-retaliation, with the federal government now stepping in to break the cycle through prosecution rather than prevention. The legal saga connecting King Von's death to Lil Durk's murder-for-hire charges represents more than isolated incidents. It epitomizes a destructive cycle that has claimed countless lives in both the rap industry and Chicago's streets. This pattern of retaliation and counter-retaliation reveals deep-rooted issues that extend far beyond any individual artist or crew. Chicago's drill scene emerged from communities devastated by decades of systemic disinvestment, police violence, and economic abandonment. Neighborhoods like O-Block, where King Von was raised, became crucibles where young men faced limited options beyond gang affiliation for protection, identity, and economic opportunity. The music that emerged from these environments naturally reflected their violent realities, turning local conflicts into lyrical content that would eventually reach global audiences. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.